You never realize what you have until it's gone. That's what everyone says, right? Well, I'm Claire, 32, and my life basically imploded because of one stupid conversation my husband wasn't even supposed to hear. Now I'm sitting in this tiny apartment surrounded by past due notices, wondering how everything went so wrong so fast. Joseph and I were together for 7 years. He wasn't exactly my dream guy when we met, more like the reliable option when I was tired of dating losers who couldn't keep a job. He worked as an HVAC technician when we first got together, not glamorous, but steady. My job at the medical billing office paid okay, nothing amazing, but between the two of us, we managed to get a decent townhouse in a neighborhood that wasn't embarrassing to have people over. Things were fine in the beginning. Joseph was attentive, always fixing things around the house, and we got along well. My sister Brooke would always say how lucky I was to find a good one. I'd smile and nod, but honestly, deep down, I always felt like I could have done better. Like I settled too early while my college friends were still dating doctors and entrepreneurs. Everything shifted when Joseph got promoted to management last year. Suddenly, he was making significantly more money, which should have been great, right? Except with the promotion came this new responsible attitude about our finances that drove me insane. He started questioning every purchase on our joint account, setting up budgets, and talking constantly about saving for our future. Do you really need another pair of shoes, Claire? He'd ask, looking at the shopping bags I'd bring home. We're trying to save for a down payment on a real house, remember? What he didn't understand was that I worked hard for my money too. Sure, he paid the mortgage, the car payments, and most of the utilities, but I covered the groceries and my own car insurance. The way I saw it, if I had money left over, that was mine to spend however I wanted. But Joseph acted like every dollar should go into our joint savings account. I started keeping a separate account he didn't know about. Nothing shady, just a place to transfer a little of each paycheck so I could buy things without getting the third degree. I told myself he was being controlling, that his extra income had given him power over me, when really, he was just being responsible with our future. That's how things were when Vanessa started at the billing office, and that's when everything really started to unravel. Vanessa was everything I wasn't, recently divorced, carefree, and living her best life, if her Instagram was anything to go by. Unlike my other friends who praised Joseph constantly, Vanessa actually listened when I vented about my marriage. Men like that are so typical, she said during our first happy hour. Got a little power and suddenly think they run everything. My ex was the same way. Finally, someone who understood. We started grabbing lunch together daily, and our conversations centered around how suffocating my marriage had become. With each conversation, my version of Joseph transformed further from the caring, hardworking man he actually was into this controlling tyrant who supposedly made my life miserable. Last night, he asked why there was a $200 0 cents withdrawal from our joint account. I told Vanessa over margaritas one Friday. Like I'm some child who needs to report every purchase. What I conveniently left out was that the $200 0 cents had gone straight into my secret account, which now held nearly $3,000 0 cents Joseph knew nothing about. That's financial abuse, Vanessa declared dramatically. He's trying to control you through money. I nodded eagerly, loving how she validated my complaints without question. Meanwhile, Joseph kept trying. He'd suggest weekend getaways or movie nights, but I'd find excuses, then complain to Vanessa about how boring his ideas were. When he brought up starting a family, I shut down completely. We can't, I snapped, though his careful financial planning had actually put us in a good position. We've been saving, he said, confusion clouding his features. That's literally what we've been working toward. Maybe your finances, I muttered, thinking of my secret account earmarked for a solo trip to Europe, not diapers and daycare. Work became my escape. One evening while working overtime, I found myself alone with Craig from accounting, tall, single, with that confident smirk that always made me a little nervous, in a good way. Your husband doesn't mind you working so late? He asked, leaning against my desk. Joseph doesn't control my schedule, I replied sharply, enjoying the way Craig raised his eyebrows, impressed. When I got home, Joseph had waited up a plate of dinner carefully covered in the microwave for me. Instead of seeing this as thoughtful, I felt annoyance bubble up, like his kindness was somehow a trap, another way to make me feel obligated to him. By the time Joseph suggested hosting a backyard barbecue for Memorial Day weekend, I was living in a completely different reality than he was. Our marriage wasn't just on different pages, we were reading entirely different books. I spent the entire week before the barbecue complaining to Vanessa about how Joseph was forcing me to host his work friends. The truth was, he'd asked if I was okay with the idea first, and I'd absently agreed while scrolling through Instagram. I took Vanessa's advice to heart, picking up several bottles of expensive Cabernet with our joint account card. When Joseph raised an eyebrow at the receipt, I launched into a tirade about how he wanted to have people over but didn't want to pay for proper entertaining. The party started at 3 with neighbors and Joseph's coworkers filtering into our backyard. I plastered on my perfect wife smile while secretly counting down the minutes until everyone would leave. Joseph was in his element, grilling burgers and telling jokes, occasionally glancing my way with hope in his eyes, like maybe this gathering would somehow bring us closer together. Vanessa arrived fashionably late, making an entrance in a sundress that turned heads. 2 glasses of wine, and I was already feeling more relaxed, though my laughs were a little too loud and my stories a little too animated. As the afternoon wore on, Joseph came over to our little group. Hey, I have an early meeting tomorrow. Maybe we should start wrapping things up around 8, he suggested quietly. God, we just got started, I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. Always so controlling. By 7, I was on my 4th glass of wine and feeling no pain. Joseph had retreated to hosting mode, cleaning up paper plates and making sure everyone had drinks. Vanessa and I had moved to the patio furniture with Craig from accounting and his friend Mike. The conversation had turned to relationships. My ex never understood the concept of personal space, Mike was saying. Always had to know where I was, who I was with. Joseph's like that, I chimed in, though it was completely untrue. So suffocating sometimes. Craig laughed. You seem like the independent type who wouldn't put up with that for long. Something about the way he said it made me sit up straighter, toss my hair back. You have no idea. So, what keeps you around? He asked, leaning forward slightly. The wine, the attention, the weeks of building this false narrative about my marriage, it all culminated in that moment. I didn't know. Joseph had come out to the patio to collect empty glasses. I didn't know he was standing just behind the sliding door. Honestly, I lowered my voice conspiratorially, I'd totally cheat if I knew I'd never get caught. Joseph's been so controlling lately, he doesn't even deserve loyalty. Vanessa giggled nervously while Craig's eyebrows shot up. Mike looked away uncomfortably, but I was on a roll now, the words spilling out unfiltered. He thinks because he pays most of the bills, he gets to dictate everything. Meanwhile, I'm just biding my time, building my escape fund. I gestured with my wine glass. 7 years with Mr. Reliable. I definitely put in my time. That's when I noticed everyone's eyes shifting to something behind me. I turned, expecting to see another neighbor, maybe Sarah with her judgmental looks. Instead, there was Joseph, frozen in the doorway, a stack of paper plates in his hands, and an expression I'd never seen before on his face. Not anger, not even hurt, just clarity. Our eyes met for a brief, excruciating moment. Then, without a word, he set down the plates, turned around, and walked back into the house. I should have gone after him immediately. I should have explained it was the wine talking, that I didn't mean it. But some stubborn, awful part of me thought he needed to stew in it a bit. Let him see what happens when he tries to end my fun early. By the time I went inside, Joseph was nowhere to be found. The kitchen was spotless. He'd cleaned everything already. Our bedroom door was closed. I fell asleep on the couch, still in my clothes, convinced we'd talk it out in the morning, and this would just become another story about Joseph being too sensitive. I had no idea I just detonated my entire life with one drunken confession. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache, still wearing yesterday's clothes. The house was unnervingly quiet. No coffee brewing, no shower running. I checked my phone, 10:37 a.m. Joseph's car wasn't in the driveway. I tried calling his cell, but it went straight to voicemail. By evening, with still no word from him, I was vacillating between worry and indignation. I texted Vanessa. Jay disappeared after the party, being dramatic as usual. She sent back a wide eyed emoji. Maybe he's really upset about what you said. Please, I replied. It's not like I actually cheated. It was just talk. Monday morning, I got ready for work as usual, half expecting to find Joseph asleep in the guest room. The house remained empty. By lunchtime, with still no contact, a tiny seed of real worry had begun to grow. That evening, I came home to find Joseph's car in the driveway. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by irritation. I'd spent all day worrying, and he couldn't even send a text. The living room looked different somehow. The large framed photo of us from our honeymoon that had hung over the fireplace was gone, leaving just a nail in the wall. So were the books he usually kept on the coffee table. His laptop wasn't in its usual spot. To Joseph, I called, tossing my purse on the counter. Where have you been? I was worried. He emerged from the hallway carrying a duffel bag, his face a mask of calm I didn't recognize. No anger, no tears, none of the emotion I'd expected. Just nothing. I needed some time to think, he said, his voice steady in a way that sent chills down my spine, and to get some things in order. What things? Why are you packing a bag? Don't you think you're overreacting a little? It was just some stupid drunk talk. He looked at me then, really looked at me like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. It wasn't just drunk talk, Claire. It was the truth. Actually, it was confirmation of what I've suspected for a while now. Joseph handed me a folder without a word. Inside were divorce papers, already filled out. My name, his name, a clinical description of assets to be divided. The room seemed to tilt sideways. This is insane, I managed, my voice shrill. You're filing for divorce because of one stupid comment at a party? No, Claire. I'm filing for divorce because you've made it abundantly clear that you don't respect me, don't value our marriage, and are actively planning to cheat if the opportunity presents itself. His voice remained calm, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. You called me controlling. You told our friends you're biding your time and building an escape fund. You said, I don't deserve loyalty. I was drunk. I was just showing off for Vanessa and that guy from accounting. That's supposed to make it better? He shook his head slightly. Even if you were exaggerating, the underlying sentiment is real. That's how you truly see me, as someone you settled for, someone you're trapped with. Where have you been staying? I asked instead, my mind scrambling to process what was happening. With my brother. I've been consulting with a lawyer. He picked up his bag again. I've already separated our finances. The joint account has enough to cover the mortgage and utilities for the next 3 months, which should give us time to decide what to do with the house. Separated our finances? You can't just do that? Panic was rising now, sharp and insistent. That's our money. Actually, I can. Particularly since I've been documenting your pattern of withdrawals to your secret account for the past 6 months. My blood went cold. What are you talking about? The account at First Federal, the one you've been transferring money to from our joint account. His eyes were flat, unreadable. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I'm the controlling one who watches our finances, remember? That's my money, I said weakly, from my paycheck. We'll let the court decide that. He moved toward the door. I'll be staying at Ryan's for now. You can't just walk out. I was shouting now, the reality of the situation finally hitting me full force. We need to talk about this. He paused at the door. That's the thing, Claire. We're past talking. You've been saying everything I needed to hear for months now. I just wasn't listening. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut with terrible finality behind him. The next few weeks were a blur of panic, denial, and desperate attempts to regain control. I called Joseph constantly at first. leaving voicemails that evolved from angry to tearful to manipulative. He responded only by text, brief and businesslike messages about logistics and finances. Even my sister Brooke, who I'd expected would take my side, seemed distant when I called to tell her about the separation. "What exactly did you say at this party?" she asked carefully. When I repeated it, there was a long silence. "Claire," she finally said, "how would you feel if Joseph had said that about you?" "It's different," I insisted. "He's been so controlling lately." "By controlling, do you mean he questions your spending from your joint account? The account you're both supposed to be using to save for your future?" My delusion shattered when I received an email from his lawyer requesting a meeting to discuss asset division. It included a detailed accounting of our finances, including documentation of every withdrawal I'd made to my secret account with dates, times, and amounts. There were also transcripts of text messages between me and Vanessa where I'd complained about Joseph and called him controlling, boring, and said I'd settled for him. The meeting with the lawyers was excruciating. Joseph sat across the table, calm and prepared, while I felt increasingly cornered as his attorney laid out his terms. They weren't even unfair. The house would be sold and proceeds split, retirement accounts divided, personal properties separated. But what stung was the cool efficiency with which Joseph had approached dismantling our life together. "We request that Ms. Mitchell provide an accounting of the funds transferred to her private account as these were drawn from joint assets," his lawyer stated. "That money is from my paychecks," I countered weakly. "Ms. Mitchell's contributions to joint expenses were minimal," the lawyer continued, sliding over a spreadsheet. "Mr. Barrett covered approximately 78% of household expenses, allowing Ms. Mitchell to save her personal income while benefiting from his financial support. The numbers were right there in black and white. Joseph had been carrying us financially far more than I'd acknowledged, even to myself. While I'd been building my escape fund and complaining about his controlling behavior, he'd been paying the vast majority of our bills. The real humiliation began when word spread among our friends. People I'd complained to about Joseph's controlling behavior now looked at me with undisguised judgment. Even Craig from accounting kept his distance, apparently not interested in the newly available woman he'd flirted with. 1 year later, and here I am, sitting in my tiny one-bedroom apartment surrounded by past due notices. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. We sold the townhouse, split the proceeds, and went our separate ways. I'd assumed my half of the house money would last longer, but between first and last month's rent on the apartment, new furniture, and my habit of emotional shopping, it disappeared alarmingly fast. My escape fund that I'd been so proud of, gone within 3 months. Turns out, supporting yourself entirely on a medical billing specialist's salary is a lot harder than sharing expenses with an HVAC manager. The final blow came last month when my sister Brooke invited me to a family barbecue. Joseph was there with Melissa, a kindergarten teacher with a warm smile and an easy way with our nieces and nephews. He looked good, happy, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years, probably because he wasn't walking on eggshells around a wife who constantly undermined him. They bought a house together, Brooke told me later, that fixer-upper on Maple Street. Joseph's been renovating it himself, and he got another promotion at work. Later, as I was helping in the kitchen, I overheard my mom and Melissa talking. "He's so thoughtful," Melissa was saying. Last week, I mentioned wanting to try that new Italian place, and he made reservations for my birthday without me even reminding him. "That's Joseph," my mom replied warmly. "Always been considerate that way?" I slipped away before they could see me, a lump forming in my throat. He'd been considerate. He'd made mental notes of little things I mentioned wanting or needing, then surprised me with them. He cooked meals, fixed things around the house, supported my career decisions, even when they meant less money for our goals. Where had my contempt for all that come from? On the drive home, memories flooded back, not of the controlling monster I'd invented, but of the patient, loving man who'd actually been my husband. The time he stayed up all night with me when I had food poisoning, how he never complained about working overtime so we could afford the townhouse I wanted, the way he looked at me on our wedding day, like he couldn't believe his luck. In that moment, I finally confronted the truth I'd been running from. Joseph hadn't been the problem in our marriage, I had. I'd been so caught up in what I thought I deserved in the life I imagined I should have had that I completely devalued the wonderful life I actually had. I'd created a fictional narrative where I was trapped with a controlling man I'd settled for, when the reality was I'd been loved deeply by someone I failed to appreciate. As I pull into the parking lot of my apartment complex, so different from the neat townhouse community we've lived in, I see a notice taped to my door, probably another late payment reminder. My phone buzzes with a text from the latest guy I've been seeing, canceling our plans again. The worst part isn't the financial struggle or the loneliness or even watching Joseph find happiness with someone else. It's knowing that I did this to myself. I destroyed something precious because I was too self absorbed to recognize what I had. If I could go back to that party, take back those careless words, maybe things would be different. But life doesn't work that way. There's no rewind button for the consequences of our actions, no do overs for the people we hurt. All I can do now is face each bill, each empty evening, each reminder of what I lost, and hope that someday I'll learn enough from this mistake to deserve someone half as good as the man I threw away. Financial planning strategies, relationship counseling benefits,